Hi guys, in this video we're going to be continuing our analysis of the Trojan Knight opening. In the last video we looked at White's second move, rare alternatives to the main lines. In this one we're going to be looking at one of the more meatier lines, and that's 2 knights c3. In the following videos we're going to be looking at the other main tries for White, which are 2e4 and 2e3. Okay, back to 2 knights c3. After this move, probably the most natural try for Black to prevent White's knight jumping into d5 and b5 would be c6. And if you saw the history videos, we covered quite a similar line to this, where Black would have played f6 instead of h6. In that case, White got quite a strong attack with 3e3, and well, the situation is pretty much the same here. In fact, it's even better for White now after h6. And if you haven't seen this position before, you might want to try some of Black's defensive moves, such as d6, e6, and just work out how White can refute those. But we're going to be covering 2e6. After this move, White's main try is 3 knight b5. Also quite popular is 3d4. Alternatives to these moves generally transpose to other lines, such as 3e3, bishop b4, and we're transposing to a line that we will cover later after 2e3. White can mix those moves up as well with knight f4 first, and then e3 with the same position. Also possible is 3e4. This is quite similar to 3d4, and White will probably follow up with that move. And in some cases, for example after bishop e4, it will just directly transpose. But I feel Black has a slightly better option than that, which is queen f6. This forces White to play queen f3, as any other move to defend f2 falls for queen d4. So after queen f3, and then exchange of queens, we're coming basically with the same position as after 3d4, but without the queens on the board. And I feel this slightly favours Black, as it cuts down White's attacking options, and Black's doing quite well. Well, Black's perfectly okay there. The final third move alternative I want to look at is knight e4. This is going to White's planning on plonking a knight on g5. Black could easily quite easily stop this with something bishop e7 or f6. But I feel the most aggressive move and the best move is f5, sort of inviting White to just stick an eye on g5. And if he obliges, then Black can simply take it and play knight h6, and he's getting some quite good counterplay with the knight coming into g4 now. So 3d4. This is quite a common line. Black's best off pinning this knight, which is generally always the case if White doesn't play knight b5 or knight e4. Just pinning this knight. Now after e4, White really has to play e4. It's playing a move like e3 seems quite timid, and in fact it falls for this queen h4 to e4 manoeuvre, when White's obliged to give up a pawn with queen f3. If he doesn't choose to give up the pawn, he can get into some trouble, because this manoeuvre to f5, which might at first seem like White stopping off the queens, falls for knight f6. And now White probably has to take this queen off, but then he's falling for knight g4, winning lots of material with a completely winning position for Black. And after queen f3, simply being a pawn down, it's obviously not a very good outcome from the opening for White. So 3e4, d5, Black trying to claim his share of the centre. I think White's best option here is probably to castle as quickly as possible, as otherwise Black will come in with this e5 move. So bishop b5 check, and castles. This was first played, I think, by Trojan Knight as White, and it's been played quite a lot by some really top players. And it's a very interesting position. It's probably about equal, really, as long as Black knows what he's doing. There are a few different tries here. In my opinion, the best move is f5. This is the move that I always play, and if Black gets the opportunity after, say, rook e1 to play f4, cramping down on this knight and also aiming in the future to push these pawns on the king side. For that reason, I think White's best try is f4, and this occurred in a game on the correspondence site Scheming Mind, between me and Recursive when I was playing black. That game continued bishop back to e7, aiming to come into h4. g3 is pretty much forced after that, and now I played knight a6. Another option is h5, pushing on the king side. The point of knight h6 is just to gain some space on the queen side as well. And after taking b5, again h5 was possible. And I just feel that here black doesn't really have many problems. Quite a good outcome from the opening really for black there. This f5 move is really the key move to remember in my opinion about this d4 line. So now on to the main move, knight b5. Black has to know a few key moves in this line. Queen h4 is quite obvious and forced. g3. Now here black does have a choice. I recommend this queen e4 move. This is sort of tried and trusted move. Queen e4 been the main move for a long time. Queen c4 is also possible, and in fact as white I don't really like playing against this move for the reason that black often gets some good attacking chances, although it may not necessarily be objectively as good as queen e4. After taking on c4, black is now the exchange down, but after bishop b4 check, he's inconvenienced white's king, and this bishop's always going to be quite annoying. For example, he could even middle pawn back straight away with bishop e1. I'd probably advise to keep the bishop around to harass white's king for a while. Objectively, white's I feel is probably slightly better here, but it's definitely an interesting alternative. But back to queen e4, e3. Now, this is a very important moment here. The best move and the move I recommend is a6. The most obvious move, and what I mentioned in the history videos, is queen takes c2, with the point that after knight takes a7, bishop b4 simply wins for black. The problem with this move is that bishop after bishop g2 rather than knight takes a7, and white's hitting both b7 and a7, is quite difficult for black. I think b6 is the best try, but however after bishop takes a8, white still has a lot of pressure in black's position, and I prefer white here. Although it may not necessarily be a disaster, black's probably can hold a draw without much hold a draw in that position. But even so, another option, quite an interesting idea, which was I first saw played by a player on the ICC called Only Sky, is queen g2. It seems a bit strange after taking the queen. Knight f6, f3, a6. Now retreating the knight back, black's position, well, it's an unclear position, but certainly black shouldn't be too worried about the outcome of the opening. So knight takes c7 is necessary if white wants to get a clear advantage. Now, the original idea was to simply smash open the c-file and invade with the rook. For example, after bishop b4 and rook c8. However, I feel that after b3 here, white is actually doing rather well. Also, king f2 may be a good move, but b3 is certainly seems quite clear cut to me. In fact, for example, we continue a few moves, evacuating the bishop and preventing black from castling. Now, if black immediately plays rook c2, this line is quite forced. d6 to facilitate castling, and now white can force the win of a pawn, hitting f7, rook c8, hitting f8 and d6, and now a pawn up with quite a clearly winning ending. Playing d6 before rook c2 is a little bit more tricky, aiming to just castle before playing rook c2. However, if white takes the initiative and plays queen c2 himself, again preventing black from castling because of queen h7 checkmate, black doesn't really have any useful moves. For example, b5 will essentially be the same as last time, as this extra b5 move doesn't help black. And again, we're transposing. White will simply win a pawn on d6. However, black does have another option to bishop b4, and that's knight d5. Or possibly rook c8 first, in fact to force c3 before playing knight d5. And now black's simply planning to take on c3 with the knight. And so the similar idea, just to smash open the c file and evade with the rook. So now my game on ICC against Only Sky continued queen a4, just evacuating with the queen before giving black has a chance to take on c3, and pinning the knight back to b6. b3, just aiming to put the bishop out on a3. Now my game against Only Sky now continued d5, which I feel is a mistake. Black does have a better move than this. And after bishop a3, bishop takes a3, white can now manoeuvre the queen to come into c5. In this position, to achieve a winning ending, white only needs to achieve the win of a rook and a pawn for the queen, as then he'll have 2 pawns for the knight, which is a winning advantage. So after queen 8 castles, queen c5, h8, queen c7. My opponent managed to avoid this material situation by playing as follows: knight c4. However, white has these outside passed pawns, which gives him quite a simple win. The game concluded. And black resigned. So a better move than d5, or more tenacious, is to play bishop b4. Now if white continues with bishop a3, black can simply take the queen now. And white does get a strong bishop, but he is still the exchange down, or for a pawn. And I don't feel that white really has good winning chances here. The rooks will always eventually activate itself, and well, I suspect it will be a draw. So to play for a win, white really needs to play queen takes b5, with the bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. And I feel this position is very difficult for black, possibly winning for white. Can continue, perhaps, castles a4. White will simply push these pawns up, a5, b4, rook b1, and it's quite difficult to defend for black. So I'd say that this queen g2 move, although very interesting, as it currently stands, seems quite dubious. So